welcoming all the guests today for our program. I just want to give a little information about the National Museum of Language and then introduce our speaker. Um, for those of you who are not familiar with us, the National Museum of Language is a unique, fully virtual museum that is not affiliated with any government agency or any large institution. And we don't have a building, but we have our website and we do outreach and online programs on a wide range of topics. But one of the things that makes us unique, aside from being a fully virtual museum, is that we're devoted to universal aspects of language, including language learning, how language is used in society, and language preservation. Those are three of our big topics, very broad. And we also celebrate what we call the magic and the beauty of human communication. So we're very broad. There are other language museums around the world, but most of them that are in existence focus on a single language in the country in which they are situated, or languages of that country. So ours is unique in having a really broad range of subjects that we like to follow. We were established as a museum in 1997, and the founder of our museum, Dr. Amelia Murdoch, had a vision of having a language museum. At that time, there were no other language museums anywhere, so we were unique then. She's passed away, but this speaker series that this event is going to be part of is one of the ways we remember Dr. Murdoch. We call it the Amelia Murdoch Speaker Series. We are supported by donations and grants that we apply for competitively. There's a virtual tour of the museum and its exhibits online on our landing page on the website. So you're certainly welcome. It's free. You're welcome to peruse that and see what we do. So also, with that, I would like to not take up any more time on this introduction, but I want to introduce our speaker today. So we're very pleased to have with us today Oreen Youssef. He's a native of Dallas, Texas, and he is a natural language processing engineer, as well as an incoming PhD student at Uppsala University, Sweden. He serves as a researcher at a group called Masakane, a grassroots organization that focuses on African languages for natural language processing. He's working with several minority script communities to better utilize their scripts online, and he assists by getting their script encoded into Unicode, creating data in their script, or rectifying display issues. Today he's going to talk about African scripts as in a broader sense, and thank you, all of you, so much for joining us today. Just before I turn the screen over to Youssef, Mr. Youssef, I just want to make a reminder that since we have quite a few people tuning in today, please stay muted unless you're going to ask a question during the question and answer part of the program. So with that, Oreen, it's over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Let me start. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Not now. It's now. Yes.
Now? Okay.
Yeah, now we can see it.
Okay. So, if you can hear me, if you can see me, then we're good. Okay. Again, my name is Oreen Youssef. I'll be going over scripts created in Africa from antiquity until today, with an emphasis on today. While there were a lot of scripts in ancient times, we'll mainly be focusing on stuff that was happening either in the 19th century or the 20th century. First, we'll have a very brief overview of the ancient, but we're going to have a very extensive overview of what I call early modern and modern. I don't know if that's what the real academics do, but this is what I'm saying. After that, we're going to go through some relevant statistics that could be a bit eye-opening for the types of writing systems, where they're distributed, and how many scripts for each language, for a common language, were created. Next steps just refers to how these scripts can be more widely adopted and what technical issues are standing in their way from being more widespread. And then there will be a very messy timeline, but it's messy on purpose. I didn't do that on accident. It's to show like how clustered everything is around the continent in terms of innovative scripts. So we're going to go all the way back to the 4th millennium BC, which is when I started this presentation. And so the first one undoubtedly is the most famous script from the African continent in general is ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, appearing in around the mid 4th millennium BC. In pop culture and academia especially, it is very well studied already, and very much in everyone's mind around the planet. While some archaeologists do believe that it was influenced somewhat by the Middle East in the form of cuneiform writing system, most still consider it one of the few independent inventions of writing in human history, with the others being mostly in Asia and one in the Americas. So fast forward a couple millennium, and the Demotic script arrives. It was derived from the cursive manner in which people were writing the Egyptian language in the Nile Delta in Lower Egypt. And it was still being used to write the Egyptian language, but at that point it was called the Demotic version of the Egyptian language. Not much later, the Meroitic script appeared. This was actually an Abugida type writing system, which we'll explain later on for those that don't know. It appeared in modern Sudan to write the Meroitic language. Use of this script ended no later than the 6th century AD. But I have seen some projects working to study it more closely and perhaps apply it to modern Sudanese languages that are descendants of the Meroitic language. These next 3 scripts that I'll be talking about will go a little in depth into them because they are still used in parts of Africa. The top 3, hieroglyphics, Demotic, and Meroitic, there's no real substantial use of it in communication. There's a lot of academic work being done, so I mean academics are typing it, but nobody's using this to talk to their friend. The next 3 scripts will be Tifinagh, Ge'ez, and Coptic, ranging from maybe the 6th century BC up until the 2nd century AD. Tifinagh appeared in places in North Africa and spread to the Sahelian region in Central and West Africa. Ge'ez is used in Ethiopia and Eritrea, and it is a descendant from a script that was actually imported from around Yemen, South Arabia. And the Coptic script is a derivation of Greek that was reinforced by another script, actually. So the top 3 we're not really going to go into. The bottom 3 we will. And there is this, which is called Insibidi. It's not a fully fledged writing system. It is considered proto-writing, which doesn't communicate everything possible that a normally functioning full writing system can, something we use today. But I put it here because it does fit the time period somewhat, and also it appears later on in a rather unsuspecting way. But it's exciting. Okay, and for the history and use of those bottom 3 scripts, first we'll start with Tifinagh. And this is what it can look like at the top and the bottom. Can you see my cursor, by the way? I hope.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Thank you. So the top the top left side of this rock is written in the Tifinagh script, but also this bottom picture is also written in the Tifinagh script, with some Arabic script at the bottom. The Originally, it was an abjad script, which means they didn't mark any vowels when writing it. The most famous abjad, I'm sure the language nerds in the chat know, is the Arabic script, where it is mostly just consonants. The way they would mark vowels is with specific diacritics placed either above or below a letter. While this didn't happen for the Tifinagh script until much later on, it still was an abjad for about almost 2,000 years. Then in 1970, it was alphabetized to be an alphabetic script called Neo-Tifinagh. And it was actually by a group of Algerian Berber activists, I think, and they were staying in Paris at the time. And this initiative caught ground to see how you can really utilize the script to write their native languages, to not be an abjad similar to Arabic, for one, and also to have this ethnic identity tied to it. And the alphabetical version of the script was actually widely debated for a very long time, maybe about 30 years, whether or not the writing system, the Berber languages of North Africa, especially Morocco, should be written in the Arabic script, like Arabic is in modern day Morocco and North Africa, or in the Latin script, which was an import from French colonization. But it was officially promoted to the official script of the language in 2003 by the King of Morocco. And this was, it had its supporters and its naysayers for this decision. Of course, it is a good thing that it was promoted to have this cultural identifier for the Berber ethnicity. But at the same time, even some Berber activists thought there isn't much use for it compared to the globalized world that's been happening for a couple decades, which was marked by the universal use of the Latin script. And again, it is heavily tied to the Amazigh, or the Berber identity, the indigenous people of North Africa before the Arab conquest in the 6th and 7th century onwards. Even though there is no technical issue with using Tifinagh on computers. You can type it, you can see it on any phone or computer, you can display it properly, you can print it, you can distribute it. It's still underutilized in a lot of sectors in North Africa: education, government, commerce, etc. With the exception of music, actually. There's a lot of Berber music is quite popular in North Africa, and there are often several lyrics written in the script, possibly to very much emphasize the roots of where the music comes from. But it's still underutilized in these key sectors in North Africa and in the Sahelian region when you get down into Mali and Niger. The next script is the Ge'ez script. So this was a descendant of the ancient South Arabian script, mainly from modern day Yemen. So here you can see an example of what I'm talking about. So we have these two tables. The top row of both of these tables, or I guess the middle row of letters, this is the Ge'ez script of how it appeared back at the turn of the first millennium. And on the bottom row is the ancient South Arabian script. You can really, graphemically, you can see how it was derived, and the phonetic value was maintained for the most part from the original letters into this Ge'ez script. This also was originally an abjad, meaning it didn't mark any vowels originally. Vowels started being introduced, I think, around the 4th century, and this had a political reason because there is a script Ge'ez and there is a language Ge'ez, which was the language of the court of aristocracy in Ethiopia and Eritrea at the time. But so spoiler, like no one speaks Giz nowadays, but even back then, people could feel the changing of the guard in terms of what is the most popular language to speak. Amharic was coming down the horizon, which is now the working language of Ethiopia. So to kind of stave the Giz language in terms of how people will remember it through inscription, they thought it would be best to mark vowels so that there could not be any mistake when trying to read history. So that turned it into an Abugida, which is what I'll show you now. Just as a quick example, because there will be a lot more later on. So you see these two letters. This one, which some people would think it looks like a Greek letter, and this one, which some people would think looks like the Latin letter T. So the phonetic values of these two scripts are and ta. This is how these letters were there in Ethiopian and Eritrea originally. These were the abjad. So every time you would see a letter every time you would read a sentence that had this kind of letter, you couldn't tell what the vowel component was, but you knew it started with this sound, and you knew this one started with this t sound. It is a coincidence that this T-looking shape has the T sound, actually, now that I think about it. But to vocalize, to add a different vowel to these letters, what people started doing was this. They would make slight modifications to this original script to change the vowel component of it. So if this original one was and you wanted u, you would add this small line in the middle of the bottom half of the script. And if you wanted an e, like a e sound at the bottom, you would add this line at the bottom. If you wanted a long a sound, you would extend the tail of it to the left. This a sound would be a circle at the bottom. This I sound would be this slight mark at the top. And then this O sound would be a circle at the top. So this is to highlight what an abugida is. That it is a consistent graphical way to tell apart the vowels of that have the same consonant. So now that you know these rules to change the vowels, and then you see these letters for this T sound, you can kind of guess what the vowels will be for this letter. It still has this mark compared to this mark, this bottom mark compared to this bottom mark. It is graphically consistent. So then we can see the phonetic values exactly match up. And that's pretty much how this abugida works. There's many abugidas in South Asia and Southeast Asia. And there's some similarity between all of them in terms of using graphemic consistency to change vowels. And in modern use, it's used by a couple dozen languages in Ethiopia and Eritrea. There's no real underutilization for languages that can very much use it for their phonetic inventory. Last one of these ancient ones is the Coptic script, actually. This is a descendant of the Greek script, which was used to transcribe demotic manuscripts during the time of Greek rule in Egypt. So the reason this is called the Coptic script is because earlier we saw hieroglyphics and the demotic script, which were used to record late Egyptian language, and you can call it mid-Egyptian language, I guess, but you can also call it the demotic language of the Egyptian language. And Coptic language is just the final modern day phase of this descent from late Egyptian to modern day. It is also underutilized, similar to the Tifinagh script on the left in North Africa, but it's for very different reasons, mainly because the speaker population. While there are like rumors of some people still having native speak of the Coptic language, it's mainly relegated to a liturgical language, similar to Latin in the Vatican for Christianity. It's mainly just used in the church. Now we get to the exciting stuff. We get to the early modern period of the 19th century where stuff gets crazy. To me, anyways. We'll be going over three very distinct scripts that appeared in the 19th century, two in West Africa and one rather mysterious one in Ethiopia, actually, which are the Vai script, an undeciphered Oromo language script, and the Bamum script of Cameroon. So, this scroll on the left is still a mystery to a lot of people. One, because no one can read it, but two, not many people know of it. In 1839, this French-Irish explorer was traveling throughout Ethiopia with his brother, and he was very chummy with a couple kings in the Gojam province of modern-day Ethiopia, or I guess Imperial Ethiopia. And he received this scroll, a copy of this scroll, from the king of this kingdom in the 19th century of modern day Ethiopia, who was named Dejazmach Goshu. And this explorer, he was quite well versed in the Oromo language of Ethiopia at the time, and he knew a bit of Arabic, which this scroll, I cropped this image to really showcase this Oromo language script, but it had a parallel Arabic version to the right, which with a translation. However, with knowledge of Arabic, Arabic script, Arabic language, and the Oromo language, this person wasn't able to decipher what this script could be. It's presumed to be in Abugida just because of the area in Ethiopia already having a very strong presence of the Giz Abugida we saw earlier. But we still don't know. And the Arabic version, it said it was written by the son of Ibn which was a ruler of the Limu Inare kingdom from 1825 to 1861. But it's still a bit up for debate because this explorer received it from someone else entirely, and there was still a bit of confusion over who wrote it. So, there were a lot of failed decipherments from Arnauld and his brother Antoine. I want to say Antoine de Abbey from France. There are one other things to consider. For a long stretch of time in Ethiopia and Eritrea, there were a lot of these quote unquote magical scrolls, which would either protect you or from bad spirits or curses or whatever, or you could curse someone else or turn them into an animal or something like that, which is quite common in the world for that time. And that scroll later down had things that were reminiscent of the traditional Ethiopian magical scrolls. So there is a chance that this script is unintelligible, similar to how the traditional Ethiopian magical scrolls were. While they had these graphemes on it, these letters on there, it was essentially gibberish. So you have to consider that as well. And that might be why it's still undeciphered. Next is the Vai script, which looks like that at the top. This was created and distributed by Momolu Duwale Bukele in Liberia in 1830. Some people think as early as 1815. Some people think as late as 1833 or 39. The reason this script is so important, first of all, is because it's the first syllabary in the entire continent, let alone the region. So what a syllabary is if you look at these letters at the bottom, notice how they all, and I put a Latin transcription at the bottom. If you look at that, you can see that all the consonants are the same. However, the vowels change as well. So if we look, when we were looking at the Giz script earlier, and how all the consonants were staying the same, it's just the vowels are changing from some slight either diacritical mark or some kind of graphemical change in the base consonant letter. It was consistent, but here you see there's no consistency between any of these letters. That is the main distinction between a syllabary and an abugida. Both record syllables, something that has a consonant and a vowel, but graphically, an abugida is quite consistent from vowel to vowel in terms of the base consonant staying the same. But in a syllabary, everything mostly changes from letter to letter. This is also considered by a lot of historical linguists or academics of writing systems or medieval linguists of West Africa to be the gold standard in terms of script innovation. And mainly because it received widespread literacy in the Vai in the land of the Vai people in Liberia, but also for some other reasons that we'll see later on. Next, we'll see the Bumum script, which was in Cameroon, who was invented, or which was invented by this guy, King Ibrahim Joya. The incredible thing about this script is he did create it by himself over a course of 14 years, but in that 14 years, it evolved from proto writing and a logography to a syllabary the same as Vai, but you can very distinctly track it over these 14 years, which is kind of incredible. It's almost a snapshot of how a lot of places in the world evolved their writing as well. It did fall into disuse in 1931 after the king was exiled from the Bumum kingdom in Cameroon. But I think at the turn of the 21st century, it's been being revived. Let's quickly go into the Vai script. So it came to Bukele in a dream. And I want you to keep track of how many times I say that, because it is a common thing for a lot of these scripts in the 19th and 20th century, even the 21st century, where people will say it came to them either in a dream or a vision, or either their ancestors sent them a revelation. It is a very common origin source for a lot of these scripts. So again, this was considered the gold standard. It still is. The reason I put first gold standard in parentheses is because it's my own opinion, because there are two other scripts that will be coming later in this presentation that I think achieve just as much as Vai did, but on a wider scale. Again, one of the reasons it is considered a gold standard is because of the ingenuity. So on the left, you can see a sampling of the letters for the Vai script. On this column on the left, you can see the consonant component of the letter, and then on the top, you can see the vowel component of the letter. This first row here in light blue, these are just pure vowels. This is how you say e, I, o, u, o, e. And this row, you keep those same vowels, but you attach a consonant to the front. So he, he, ha, ho, hu, ha, he, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of sounds you can make in language. So this is only a 20% sample of all the possible Vai characters. And here are their respective punctuation marks, the comma period, exclamation mark, and question mark. One of the reasons this is considered so ingenious is because at that time, there were no syllabaries in the region. The concept itself didn't exist for Bukele, or presumably for any of the neighboring kingdoms or empires. The Arabic script was very much used for the past 1,000 years in different areas. We won't get into those scripts because they're their own topic and it's massive. But a lot of these script creators were Muslims, and they knew of the Arabic script and how it worked. But again, the Arabic script, like the original Tifinagh, is an abjad. It didn't mark any vowels. So to go from the idea of writing to only writing consonants to something that very much was vowel heavy and syllabic in nature is quite a jump in terms of innovation. To him, it really was a new idea. Another reason why it's in high regard is because of the schooling. Very quickly after it was invented, a lot of schools were built in neighboring cities or city-states, I believe, and it was promoted by Bukele, but also his followers. And from then until now, there's been a lot of literature written in the script. I believe it peaked in the 1970s and 80s, but it's still being produced nowadays. Um, so on the right, you can see. Actually, I found this from a friend of mine who's a librarian, the catalog librarian at Yale, who works with a fluent Vi speaker and writer, or actually several of them. And on the left, you can see this incubator Wikipedia for the Vi script. It's not a full Wikipedia yet. You can't really just go and find it. There have to be a lot of qualifications you meet to be promoted to a full Wikipedia language. But the way you do that is just by creating a lot of articles on various topics, and eventually you will be promoted to a full Wikipedia. But this one is on, they're talking about theory of relativity. I can't read it, but that's what they say. And again, the most exciting part of anyone inventing a script, as you'll see later on, is it's very hard to find early and sustained literacy. It's very hard to convince people to change the way they're writing, or convince them to pour their resources into changing how like their world works through writing. One of the biggest things also that this achieved was a very clear mark, a very clear identifying aspect of the Vi people in Liberia and in the region in general. When we talk with anyone in the region, and when you show them this, they can very clearly say, "Oh, this belongs to the Vi people. This is a sign of them." Wanting to be marked for your identity in a positive light will come up later again in a lot of these scripts. So the Bamum script, there were 7 phases of the script created by King Ibrahim Njoya. This was the script that I mentioned, where you can see a very clear evolution from proto writing and ideographic and logographic symbols to a syllabary, the same way the Vi script was, where it had syllables encoded into each letter. The fourth phase was phase A. I know they didn't call this that, but I think researchers after that came up with this terminology, phases A through G. So phase A was created right at the very end of the 19th century. He was trying to sneak that in. So this is how the original script looked like. And this is a sampling of a lot of different symbols. So it has these pictograms, and their interpretations were full meanings. I wish I had an English translation, but instead of having a specific phoneme, one specific sound, or a syllable of a consonant and vowel, they would have entire meanings associated with them. The first phase is called lewa, or book, in the Bamum language, and it consisted of 465 pictograms like this, 10 of which were digits, 0 through 9. This digit that now represents 0 originally did represent 10. It changed to represent 0 when digital mathematics were introduced to the region. Something interesting about this point of writing for the Bamum was they were very flexible for 3 out of the 4 possible ways to write something. They were okay with writing top to bottom. They were okay with writing bottom to top. They were okay with writing left to right, how we do in English or other languages that use the Latin script. But they were very much against writing right to left due to the neighboring Hausa kingdoms and tribes and city-states, mainly because the Hausa wrote from right to left. And this is interesting because it's an instance of an ideology influencing how writing must be written beyond just a script. There have been countless instances of wanting to pick a particular script for political or religious ideas, like the Christianization of Europe, promoting, adopting, enforcing the Latin script on top of many different people, or the Arabic script being favored by Muslim countries. But to pick a specific, to be influenced, or to influence the direction you're writing, because of a competitor or a nearby kingdom, is quite interesting. So the next 5 phases are very consistent in terms of the change that we saw. So on the right here, we can see 3 examples from phase A. It's these 3 pictograms, and we'll see how they change from phases B to E throughout the years. So phase B was very much at the end of that century. He had the deadline. This phase of the script was called Mbima, or mixed script, and it simplified the first phase of these pictograms. So we can see going from A to B how these left 3 graphemes or designs change slightly to the next phase in the following 3 or 4 years. Especially the first one, the orientation changed. The next 2, some details were omitted. They also got rid of about 72 of these characters, but added another 45. And at this point, they solidified the writing direction, and we would never again see top to bottom or bottom to top, and definitely not right to left for the foreseeable future, even until now. Phase B happened in 1902, and again, we're going to see a lot of patterns here, where each phase they start renaming what that would be. So this one was named after the first 3 letters of the script, and it also simplified the previous phase. In this case, phase B. They got rid of some letters. And they got down to about 371 characters. Phase D came a few years later, and again, it gets a new name, named after the first 4 characters this time, and simplified the previous version. And they got rid of some letters as well. Now you're down to 285 characters. The last phase of this cluster of scripts happened in 1907 to 1908. Again, renamed, simplified the previous phase, and now you're down to about just shy of 200 different characters. And this script was actually, there was a Bible created with this phase of the script. But the most important part is this is the end of the pictographic and logographic writing. This is where all of the academics fawn over this script, because in the next phase everything's different. So there are only 2 phases left, F and G. And on the top right, you can see how going from phase A to phase E, how the script has changed over time. The orientation changes, some detail is lost, even more detail is lost. They clean it up a bit, and a lot of detail and perhaps some superfluous aspects of a grapheme are lost, or extremely simplified from phase D to phase E. But still, these phases, they still had meanings associated with it, not just sounds, but encoded value of ideas. Phase F came in 1910, and again they renamed it Akauku after the first 4 letters of the script, and now they trimmed almost I think 75% of it, getting it down to 82 characters, still with 10 digits. But now it became syllabary, similar to the Vi, similar to the similar to the Vi. And the reason this is important is because in the span of 14 years, the king, he went from pictographic writing or proto-writing, pictographic writing, ideograms, all the way to a very phonetic script, just in the span of 14 years, where in human history it took countless. So here you can see the new letters from the phase E pictograms. These last 2 I included because not much changed graphically, but the top one did for some reason. But now each of these has this extremely short phonetic component associated with it. It has the syllable a, it has the syllable re, it has the syllable mu. And this phase was used a lot when it came out. It was used to record court rulings, stuff happening in government or the kingdom at the time, births, marriages, deaths, etc., etc. Phase G is a bit of just an aesthetic uh, facelift for Phase F in 1918. By Phase F, you can kind of consider it completed in terms of how it changed the type of writing system it evolved to be. But Phase G is important for a couple other things. It gets a new name. They trim off a couple more letters. And those same 10-digit graphemes we saw earlier, they were repurposed as 10 other syllables. So whenever they appear in a text, like in sentences where, I mean, if you speak the language, when you see it in words, you know it represents a sound. When you see it in certain contexts, you'll see it as a number. And the introduction of two diacritics, one to cover any missing syllable that they required after that point. And I really like this picture because you can see the king here teaching his subjects his script. But this banner in the background, you can actually see all the original pictograms. But also at the back of the students or the followers, you can see how the syllabic characters, and it's almost like painting a history of his accomplishment. So in 14 years, this king, he went from all of these almost 500 different pictograms, just to this, about 80 different pictograms, still including 10 digits to do mathematics, and a couple of diacritics to cover anything that could be missing. Then, and this will be a last slide before I believe the break, a 10-minute break. So in the 1910s, there was another script called the Bagam that was also created in Cameroon near the Bamoum, the script we just saw. But then it didn't really stop, because in this century, there was a bit of an explosion that happened. Until now, like until last week. Through the decades of the colonial era, wars of independence soon to be won, the immediate post-colonial world many people were living in, and the decades that followed with holdovers and language policy, there was a pretty big explosion of scripts that were invented everywhere throughout the continent for various reasons. There wasn't enough time to go through everything, but the ones in bold I will either go into in depth or mention for very specific reasons that give some kind of context for why scripts keep emerging. And yeah, so I think we'll get through some of them. And I think we take a 10-minute break now, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, we'll go ahead and take a break now.
See, I had two announcements I wanted to make before we break. Okay, so one of them, which I should have said at the beginning, but actually we have more people here right now than we did when we were first introducing everyone. We definitely want to give a shout out to Tim Brooks and the Endangered Languages Project, because he introduced us to Orim Youssef to do this presentation. And this presentation is actually part of a much bigger project that's going to be going on in a few days. On the 23rd of January, there's going to be a presentation called the World Endangered Writing Project. And there are going to be presentations throughout the day online, and we can pull up a list, let's see, a website that you can go to, and they're really an amazing list of speakers who are going to be involved in the World Endangered Writing Day event, starting from morning until evening. And you need, so I would suggest, if you're interested in this, to go to their website and take a look at the program. You're supposed to register for each speaker program individually. Just sign up for the ones that you actually want to listen to, and then you'll get a link to that event. So this is important. We wouldn't have had today's presentation without being associated with World Endangered Writing Day and Tim Brooks and the Endangered Languages Project. The second thing I'd like to mention before everyone disperses for the break is we want to express our appreciation to the distinguished guest who's here today, Dr. Pippa Steele from Cambridge, who is very eminent in the field of writing systems. She is a principal investigator in two big projects, the VIEWS project, Visual Interactions in Early Writing Systems, and the CRUISE project, Context of and Relations Between Early Writing Systems. Just a brief mention of some of her many distinguished works. So again, thank you, Dr. Steele, for joining us today. Okay, and Emily, back to you.
Yes, so I think we actually have received a couple of questions now in the chat. Irene, if you're amenable to answering a couple of questions before our break.
If I can, yeah.
Okay, great. So I think we have our first question from Olgirsh. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Sorry, I had some technical problems. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is like this, because that's one of the things we actually are very interested in our research group is what actually is writing. There are such systems in Africa, CBD, like Alinkra, is more of a visual communication system. Or I made aware by one of our African studies colleagues in Warsaw in Poland. There's this amazing system of bead letters. They're made out of beads. It's used in Zulu-speaking communities, which is really interesting. It is not writing, although if you show this first Bamum characters, they're very much reminding me of Adinkra symbols. What is your attitude towards this? Is it writing? It is not in the range of your interest? Or maybe sometime we will find Adinkra Unicode, or maybe you already have it.
Yeah. So if people didn't hear him, he was talking about there are ways of there's different ways of communication and record keeping in different parts of Southern Africa and West Africa. So one example, I think, is in Angola and Namibia, and maybe part of DRC, which people would encode meaning into beads. It's quite similar to, I forget the name of it, but it's in South America with people in ancient times. They would have these ropes and particular patterns in which you knot them and tie them and design them. It was for record keeping, I think, maybe for taxes or something like that. That's quite interesting because the interest you have in between that and the Bamum script, the pictograms for the Bamum script, you say, are quite similar to the Adinkra symbols in Ghana for the Akan people, which is a very large umbrella term for different types of people with that fit certain cultural and linguistic characteristics. Actually, I think I have it on the screen. In the 2010s, actually, so this Adinkra here, it's referring to a phonetic alphabet that someone created from Ghana, and it was inspired by the original Adinkra pictograms. So in that area, they had these symbols that had very, very extremely specific meanings that encoded possibly philosophy, characteristics of people, and stuff like this. And they're quite culturally important to the Akan people. So while it's not a full-fledged writing system, the old one, compared to this new one, I am quite interested in them. I don't know if Unicode will encode those. And for people in the chat that don't know what Unicode is, it's the reason you can see any of this, really. It's the organization that's in charge of properly displaying or rendering any text in the world. nowadays. There were some competitors in like the 80s and 90s, I think, but I wasn't around for that. I would like those to get encoded into Unicode. There are some hurdles though, which could include if there's academic interest to lobby Unicode to do that. Because if there's academic interest, they oftentimes listen to that than compared to if you're nobody. So if there's any academic projects related to that you know of, actually please email me about that because I'm curious. This person there that created this script from the original Adinkra symbols into this alphabet, I know he would be interested also.
Yes, I mention it because actually it's very interesting what you say about Adinkra. Sorry for breaking in, because there is a very similar writing system that is not non-emergent, unfortunately, but it was created. It's called Silabario Amazonico, and it is to encode the native languages in South and Central America, which is right now it's kind of not you. I'm in touch with its creator also. It'll be also very interesting, Mr. Juan Casco. And now I shut up.
What was the no? Don't shut up! Don't shut up! What was the name of that again? I'm interested.
Silabario Amazonico.
Okay, I'll look that up during the break. Actually, thank you.
His name is Juan Casco with
Juan
two
Kafka.
C's,
Okay.
C-S-C-O. He's on Academia, if you know how to use it.
Okay. I'm not sure, but I'll look up. I'll look it up.
And for those of you who've been following the chat, a couple of our attendees, including Matthew Lane and Parant, have mentioned that this bead system of the Incas is called Kipu,
Yeah.
Q-U-I-P-U, and there's going to be a talk about Kipu during the Endangered Writing Day conference. So
Yeah. On the 23rd, right?
Yeah, on the 23rd. So if you're interested in Kipu, there's a chance to learn more about it. All right, so I probably should get to the break, right?
Right. There, the one other question
Okay.
was also from Pront, and it said, is it true that one of the developers of Vi previously worked on the Native American Cherokee script, and then another of our attendees, Janice, answered that and said this is not known 100%, but cannot be excluded and provided an article citation. So I think that's been answered, but the article citation is in the chat for folks who are interested in learning more about that potential relationship.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I could say one thing about that if people don't want to click that link, just to be quick. Yeah, it is very interesting. I don't know 100% if it's true, but if it is, it would be very crazy. So for people that don't know, the Cherokee people in North America, in the 1820s, there was a man named Sequoyah, and he was a polymath, some big brain guy. And he created a script for their language that immediately was like wildfire. And that was in the 1820s, about 10 years before, maybe 5 to 10 years before the Vi script was created in Liberia. The reason some people think there's a connection between the Cherokee and the Vi is because during that time, there were some Cherokee migrants to Liberia. And there was one such notable person, I forget his last name, but something Curtis or Curtis something, I forget. But he married into a prominent Vi family, and I think he had a Vi wife. And this was after the fact that the Cherokee script was invented, and literacy was growing rapidly during this time, immediately after the script was created. And I believe one of the house that this Cherokee man had with his Vi wife, I think on the top of their house there was some Vi symbols after the Vi script was created. So the idea that he might have known the Cherokee script because he's Cherokee and immediately going to Liberia a few years before the Vi script was created. And I think he settled on the coastal part of Liberia, which is where Bukele, the creator of the Vi script, he spent some time at before he went more inland to his home and created the Vi script. There's an idea that maybe he saw that script and got an idea, especially for a syllabary, perhaps, because the Cherokee script is also a syllabary. If there's an academic that like has some more updated information, that would be nice. Okay. Okay, so we left off on this page, which I like to deem the explosion. We're going to go through a few of these scripts for different reasons. So the first one we're going to go over is the Bagam script, which was created in 1910 by King Pufong. Which he ruled over an area in Cameroon, which was quite close to the Bamum people and the Bamum kingdom that we talked about earlier. Here are some of the letters, quote unquote letters, of the script. A big issue for understanding how the script works is because it's not fully deciphered yet. It fell into heavy disuse and was largely forgotten by people, and also it's quite hard to decipher now by academics, local or foreign. So if we look at this zoomed in image of Cameroon, you can see these two groups extremely close to each other. The Bagam people and the Mamoon people we saw earlier. The reason I bring up this script, not that it has too much use nowadays, is because this century would see a lot of influence going back and forth between neighboring kingdoms, communities that would create scripts, and it's quite hard to find a nice and neat line that connects all of them and wondering how each influenced each other. So if we want to see how the Bagam script is similar in nature to the Bamum script, we can look at these couple of tables on the right. While there aren't too many similarities for the majority of the script, these select graphemes from the Bagam and the Bamum script we can see are quite similar in design between the ones that are lined up parallel to each other. There are some where you can see similarities in the phonetic component as well. Like here and here, here you can see some bilabial phonetic value associated between these two. And this, I think, was the first instance of a local kingdom being influenced by another local kingdom in terms of graphemes for a quote unquote full writing system between Bagam and Bamum I'm talking about. But there are a few more instances that I haven't seen too much research on. So there's another script also in Liberia. You'll find out later that Liberia is for one reason or another is a hotbed for literacy and script invention. So there's another script called the Bassa Va, and I think Va in their language just means like throwing star. So you're quite literally just throwing letters or throwing sounds at each other. And in the 1920s, this was created. It looks a little like this. The good thing is this is typable on your phone or your computers. It's been in Unicode for quite some time now. The phonetic components I'm not too interested to talk about, but the graphemes themselves, the shapes of them will be apparent for what I'm talking about later on. A little history of it. It was, for the most part, forgotten in Liberia, but there were Bassa people in the Americas, like in Brazil and in the West Indies, that still used this script. And I think there was a doctor from Liberia who went there, rediscovered it for himself, went back to Liberia, created a typewriter for it, and it was in circulation for about 30 years after that. And it was quite interesting to see how a script can survive through the diaspora and be brought back to the original source of it. Sadly, it did fall into disuse, I think, in after the 1950s. However, there is another script called the Gola script, and I actually made this slide last, even though it shows up halfway through because I just learned this the other day. This is quite anecdotal, but I still think it has some value. So the Gola are people also in Liberia, this will be a common thing. They're split between Liberia and Sierra Leone. They're quite close to the Vai and the Bassa and some other people, like the Kisi people also. I'm not exactly sure when the script was created, but I have a very strong feeling it was after the Bassa Va script was invented in the 1920s, because this is what their script looked like. And we know very little about the script. However, there are a lot of similarities between these two scripts. Namely, while there are some, like this one and this one and this one and this one, and a few more that are very, very almost identical, a lot of these other ones kind of look like rotations of the Bassa script, namely this column of letters and this letter, and a couple other, or I remember I counted them earlier, and I think it was around like 24 letters or something, had very strong resemblance to the Bassa script. And I was just on the phone with a librarian the other day, and he told me about how he has a friend that was writing in the Gola script back in Liberia, and he was just passing the time waiting for something, and he was just and this was a child when he was a child. He was just drawing in the dirt for fun, and he was just drawing these Gola letters, and a group of Bassa women walked by, and they assumed that he was writing something in Bassa, and they were intimately aware of the fact that it is extremely close graphemically, like graphically. But that's all I know at this point. But the similarities don't end there. Earlier we saw the Vai script in Liberia, and this is where it gets a little more complicated, but much more interesting. There is a small amount of research that suggests that there is some kind of pool, this ancient and common symbolic tradition among Mande languages, which are in that area near Liberia, Sierra Leone, etc., where people might be mining this pool of ideas that come from some shared symbolism in their traditions that might be influencing their script inventions and neighboring scripts. Here's another script called Masaba. It's used to write the Bambara language in Mali, and it also could be used for other varieties of this umbrella term called Manding, which has a lot of varieties and are quote unquote official in different countries, but they're all mutually intelligible. Either way, there are a lot of similarities between these two scripts for select letters. However, there is no shared phonetic value, but the graphemic instances are quite similar to each other. And if you're very interested, there's a paper in French that I was reading where there are some similarities between these two and also some extremely under-researched secret scripts in the Hod region of southeast Mauritania, where you can see more and more connections between these Mande languages and their symbology, their symbology. So earlier I mentioned this script Masaba. It's used to write Bambara, which is one variety of an umbrella term called Manding. And there are a lot of instances of there being scripts for this Manding macro language. So there's about 40 million speakers of this macro language Manding, and oftentimes it's actually the majority of the time it is divided into dialects that are treated as official languages, or separate languages. I mean, just in literature, but really they're all part of this macro language called Manding. And in places like Mali, the variety most spoken there is Bambara. You go south into Guinea, it's Maninka. You go westward into Senegal and Guinea, and you see Mandinka. If you go towards the east, you'll see Jula in Burkina Faso. So one script, and I'm going to be going in terms of use, relevance, and acceptance for these scripts from least to most, because the last one is a doozy. So first it's called Mirden, and I just learned about this script maybe last year. This was created a little over a decade ago by Yacoba Diakite in Northeast Guinea, and the script was, I've only seen one academic paper about it in Russian, and I talked to the creator, I talked to the author of that paper, and he says that this particular script, which is an alphabet running left to right, it hasn't circulated beyond this creator's inner circle and perhaps a couple other curious people. And apparently, he was just riding around on his motorbike, really promoting the heck out of the script, which was, I admire that a bit. To go on, earlier I talked about a script named Masaba, but within a month, 1 month ago, I learned about another script called Amasaba, and I haven't published anything about this online or anything, but this was created maybe 30 years ago, also in Mali, in a place called, he was from a place historically called Karta, which is a historical term for some Bambara empires in the region. And Mali, similar to Liberia, is a very, it's a hotspot for a lot of these scripts that will show up later. The interesting things about this, I don't know too much about these, but it is a syllabary similar to Vai, Bamum, and also the Masaba script we talked about earlier that we'll see later. The interesting thing about this is he has been improving it for the past 30 years, and presumably teaching people in his inner circle in the K's region of Mali. And he has gotten in contact with the Malian Academy of Languages, who I'm also in contact with. The official policy in Mali, in terms of writing, in terms of orthography, is still a holdover from the colonial era, where all of the languages must be written in the Latin script. This, of course, it came from French rule. Later on, post-independence, it was the idea that you don't want to promote a script that has an ethnic identifier to exclude others, because most African countries are not homogenous at all, with a couple of exceptions, maybe in the north and maybe Somalia. But here we see the basic inventory of the syllabary, digits for it going up. I'm not sure how much. I think up to like 100,000 or some multiple of 100,000, and an explanation of how you change the vowel component of these syllabic letters. He's using the Arabic script to kind of translate to us. And I don't know how many people in this chat can read the Arabic script, but these basic letters, or these letters are very basic in Arabic, and this line on top is changing the vowel of the letter to add an at the end of it. And for these Masaba syllabic letters, presumably they have, their nature is a different vowel than because he's adding a circle on top of these to create this same effect that is found in Arabic. I think the inherent vowel for these is E. So instead of like ha, it would be he, which is quite interesting because I know a lot of Abugidas tend to go towards having an inherent sound. But now we get to something I can talk quite a bit about, the Masaba script that looks a little like this. I actually made this font myself. I know there's at least one font designer in here, so I hope there's you hold criticism, because I don't know what I was doing when I was doing it. But I finished it, and it's helping the community at this point. this script, there was only one academic paper ever published in Mali or abroad about this script, and it was thought to be in disuse since then. It was born in the Kayes region of Mali, which I highlighted here. It was created in 1930 by 3 Matasi people. The Matasi are a distinct part of the Bambara people. And the reason I emphasize 3 here is because in the literature, only one person, this person, Woyo Kolobali, he got all of the credit. But there were 2 other, after talking with the elders in the region that are still using the script, there was some missing information. And actually, the reason it is called Mataba is because it means 3 people. Ma and Saba mean 3 persons. And it has no connection to the word Matasi at all, which is, they told me that. So after the 1930s, it was used in a place called Atatemala in the Kayes region in the westernmost province of Mali, and it was used in a lot of surrounding areas. It was actually more popular after the death of this most prominent creator, Woyo Kolobali. It was used for tax purposes, debt documentation, a couple court rulings, calculations, like at the market, and personal correspondences. A big reason why the Masaba script was created was because there was no formal school in the area. In the 1930s, French colonial school was, by law, you had to go there. However, it wasn't widely distributed. In very remote places like Asatiamala, there wasn't a local school. There would often be a colonial officer that would come into your town, your city, or your village, and you would have to elect a student from that region to go to the colonial school, and it would be very far away. So people would have to send their kid there, and it would be very hard to communicate with them, because while the student would start being educated in French, the parents oftentimes didn't know any French, so they would have to find people to read aloud French letters that the kid would send back to their parents. Even if the parents of the children didn't want their kid to go there, oftentimes they didn't really have a choice. And that comes from the conversations I had with the Secretary General of the Malian Academy of Languages, who they have quite extensive documentation of how the colonial schools were run in the 20th century. Another interesting thing is the creation of this script was partly stimulated by the desire for political independence among the Masasi people. Even though they are considered Bambara people, they speak Bambara language, they are, I think they were a Salafi Islamic sect of within the Bambara people. There's some research showing that after Mali won the war for independence from France, there in this region, in the Kayes region of Mali, there was a biscriptal banner raised in the Latin script, but also the Masaba script, proclaiming how happy they were that they won independence. This idea to mark your ethnicity or your sub-identity keeps coming up the same way that we saw earlier with how the Bamon script wanted to distinctly be against the Hausa orthography in terms of wanting to be written left to right and not right to left, how the Hausa people were doing it. And from my conversations with the Malian Academy of Languages, they were quite willing to voice their support for this script to be encoded into Unicode, which I'm working on now, especially for a couple other scripts in the region, which might happen in, this year. A proposal might come forth this year with their support. Now we get to the new gold standard, which is called Umko, and it was created by this man, Solomon Kante, in 1949 in Kankan, Guinea, in Ivory Coast, but it was brought later. It was later brought to his home in Kankan, Guinea. The script was partially created in response to negative comments from a Lebanese author and also a topographer, actually. He made some big accomplishments in Arabic topography with, I think, a typewriter. But this Lebanese author, Salman Kante, he stumbled upon a book in Ivory Coast by this person, and he called African languages similar to the sounds birds make in how it's impossible to transcribe them properly. So partially he did make this to disprove this person. Another big thing to remember about this Nko script is there's an Nko script and there's an Nko language, similar to how way earlier in the presentation we saw the Ge'ez script and the Ge'ez language. Unlike the Ge'ez language, which is liturgical now, it's only used in the Ethiopian or Eritrean Orthodox churches. The Nko language was created by this person, Solomon Kante, to be a literary language or a Koine language, like Koine Greek in ancient times, where even though Manding language, this umbrella term, is mutually understandable by all of these different people, the Bambara, the Mandinka, the Jula, the Mandinka. He created this fusion of all of them so that everyone would write the exact same way and understand it in their respective varieties. And it was more influenced by his native variety in Kankan, of course. The reason I call this the next gold standard is because it like Vice, rapidly spread throughout the Mande world of West Africa. Soon after it was created, transcriptions, translations, new works were written in this new literary standard of Nko. And it hasn't really stopped since it was created in 1949, which the biggest thing you can gain from this is in the past maybe 50 to 60 years, 60 to 70 years post-independence, the colonial mentality to have all of these languages be written in the Latin script where they're getting government funding for the past half century, it still can't outpace the informal education that these passionate script and language activists have had for this particular script and this literary standard of writing, which kind of shows that passion always, genuineness and passion are quite powerful and can outpace money from official bodies, at least in this case. It is one of the most successful scripts in this entire presentation, not just for the Manding language. There's a lot of technical capabilities that it's had for a very long time, and it has shaped Maninka identity in Guinea, but also strengthened all of Manding identity elsewhere in West Africa. Also, another thing that I missed, which is a shame because I work in this field in natural language processing. This past December, the World Machine Translation Conference took place in Singapore in early December. And I just got in contact with some Nko activists and linguists, and they participated with computer scientists from Guinea and elsewhere in West Africa for machine translation for Nko, creating tools, different corpuses or corpora, and creating baseline results. The reason that's quite significant is because in natural language processing, there is this idea of low resource languages, and oftentimes it refers to anything that is not really either Western European languages or the 6 United Nations languages, there is an immense amount of data created daily in those languages, and the countries those languages are spoken in are very wealthy. They have a lot of technical support for their languages. But everyone else could be considered a low resource language. To simplify it, there's more granularity, but that is the gist of it. The reason a lot of these languages don't have data for stuff like AI is because the languages, one, they don't have the proper funding. Two, in a lot of places, I'll use Africa as an example, but India could also be an example despite their large population, is because post-independence from the colonial era, certain languages like English and French and Portuguese in some areas, because they are still the official language, or if they're not the official language, they are the de facto language of government, commerce, education, etc. There is high social pressure to get good at these languages from the parent to the child. And it's not hard to understand why. It's because there's a higher chance you'll make a lot of money if you learn one of these languages than if you don't. And it's not to their own fault, but it is to the detriment of their own languages, where if you don't use it enough for everything, there won't be enough data for that. And if there's not enough data for that, you won't be included in the digital world in the number of tools you can make, like Google Translate, or I can use Google as an example because they do everything. Like translation is not just one of them, but even finding stuff online, the more data you have, the easier it is to find it. Not just because there's more of it, but because the searching algorithm, like the information retrieval algorithms, the more data they're trained on, the easier it is to find exactly what you want. The reason why English Google search is so good is because there's so much English data. So I was very happy that I saw this paper. It's a step in the right direction, and I reached out to them. I hope to help them in the coming year for some more research. I also did talk to a couple of people the other day to prepare for this presentation. While it's not an official orthography in any country yet, because of the high percentage of people that use it nowadays, the informal schools of education in these highlighted countries, there has been a lot of political discussion, especially in Mali in the past couple of years, where activists have been heavily lobbying to make it the orthography of education, at least in places that have a high Bambara concentration. Especially in the past couple of years when Mali removed French as the official language and replaced it with Bambara. From what I've heard from activists, they're quite hopeful that one day it will be the official orthography. The downside is the biggest roadblock for this, from what they say, is the supporters of the Latin orthography, which is a case of I wouldn't even call it inter-community disagreements, because there's 40 million people. You can't really agree with anybody or everybody, but the supporters of the Latin script, mainly from the older generation, but also from the younger generation, they see it as a way to connect with most languages in the world because of the kind of forced universality of the Latin script from the colonial era globally. Since Bambara in Mali has been promoted, and because teaching in the formal teaching of the Nko script is so widespread, the government is being lobbied by activists to make it the official orthography. And yeah, I do consider this the second gold standard in terms of chronology after the VAI in the timeline. Next, we'll go all the way to East Africa. And for the Somali language, and for context, in the 20th century, there was intense nationalism rising in Somalia. The country was split apart by both Britain and France for the majority of about 70 years. So the idea in the early 20th century is a bunch of Somali academics and philosophers, business people, they thought that they needed a script as an ethnic identifier. And I think this is the third or fourth time I've mentioned this, where people want to be marked to distinguish themselves from other people. A really good example I'll bring up is the Armenian script. Because of how tied it is to Armenian history, culture, linguistics, everything. Where this idea to want to separate yourself from others, it's not in a bad way. It's to just establish yourself. And the same thing was happening in Somalia during this century. The first one is the Osmania script, which is in Unicode, so you can type it anywhere and everywhere. And it looks a little something like this. It was created in 1920 by Osman Yusuf Kanadid, and it was a very phonetically sound script that suited the Somali language, and he made sure that there were no resemblances to the Arabic or the Latin script reflecting this nationalism that I mentioned earlier. The Latin script came from the colonial era, but before that, Somali was written for a few centuries with the Arabic script. And there were typewriters created for it, and it was quite widespread among the Somali Youth League as well, which up until I think the 1970s. And of course, there was a body of literature as well, which you can find online. The next one is the Borama script, or some people call it the Gadabursi script. It's also an alphabet, like the Osmani script, and it looks something like this. This one was created by Abdurrahman Sheikh Noor in 1933, a decade and a half after the Osmani script. This one wasn't as widespread as the Osmani script, but it did write a lot of qasida, which is Islamic poetry, throughout Somalia. And this was mainly used by Abdurrahman Sheikh Noor's inner circle merchants in Barama and the Zayla ports in Somalia, and some curious students. The last one for Somali is the Kadare script. It looks a little like this. And if there's any Indologists in the chat, people that study India, I have heard some comments where some people think that some of these look, the capital letters, some of them are reminiscent of the Brahmi script from ancient India. This was created in 52 by Hussein Sheikh Ahmed Kadare. And in 1972, the then president of Somalia, Siad Barre, he had a council of literary people where they made a definitive decision to discuss and finally pick a script that would be promoted throughout Somalia. While none of these three were selected and they went ahead with the Latin script, they did consider this script to be the most accurate to the Somali language for phonology and other aspects as well. And you can read about it online, actually. Also, the interesting is this is the only bicameral script, meaning it has uppercase and lowercase out of these three. The other two, they didn't see any need for it, but it is interesting when, because bicameral scripts, at least in some languages, it came about for how material was used to create a script. So it's like for Greek or Latin, where you chisel it into stone, which was abundant in the area, and then eventually, when you change material into paper or something, cursive comes about. So that's how the lowercase letters came about. But it's interesting that he opted for this right off the bat. And the lowercase letters exclusively came from cursive as well. And here's an example of Somalian cursive in the Kadari script. And yeah, this renaissance of script creation would only last until 1972, when the modified Latin script devised by Shira Jama Ahmed was made the nation's official writing system. One that is quite interesting to me is the Beria script, or the Zagawa, or Erfe. There's a lot of names for it. So the Beri people are in Chad and the Darfur region of Sudan. And they call themselves the Beri, but the Zagawa word comes from, it's their name in the Arabic language. And Erfe just means writing. And in literature, you can find all three of these names. It was created in the 50s by a school teacher named Adam Tajir. And I think in 2000, very early 2000s, it was improved upon by a veterinarian named Siddiq Ahmed Isa, and it looked a little something like this. The interesting thing about this is if you look very closely to these letters, so for each pair of these letters, the one on the left is the capital letter, and they also have a bicameral script, capitalization in lowercase letters. The innovative thing about this is the capital letter descends lower than the lowercase one, which I've never really seen a script that does this before. The way that if you look here at the word Beria, the capital B is it ascends beyond these lowercase letters. But here it's quite innovative typography in that it's the complete opposite. And those are actually based on brand marks that are found in their culture. So like this, when people have cattle, they'll brand it. Like here, they'll brand cows to make sure people know who owns the cattle. So these brand marks were incorporated into this script. So this one comes from this. Then the phonetic value that they gave them, I assume, comes from either what they would call the brand marks, maybe a family, like the family or the community that has this particular brand. There's a lot of reasons. And yeah, it has pretty innovative typography with the descending uppercase. And I know there's still, from the last thing that I remember, they're still insisting on having this. But I know there was some discussion of whether or not they were going to abandon that or not. And a really positive thing is it has very robust online teaching, despite their community being so spread out. Originally, they are from Chad and this region of Sudan, the Darfur region. But in the past few decades, that the region has been very turbulent from civil war, and so a lot of people fled the region. And you can find people in Turkey or Israel or the Americas, and still, of course, the majority are still there. But there's really robust teaching online. Now, we go back to East Africa, again to the Oromo language. Earlier I mentioned an undeciphered script for the Oromo language from the 1830s. If we fast forward to the 1950s, there's another one that comes out, this time created by this person named Sheikh Bakri Sapalo in 1956. The creation of this script, which was in Abu Ghida, similar to the Ge'ez script, where you have a base letter and slightly change that base letter to change the vowel to be graphically consistent throughout. When this came about, it ushered in a period of a lot of personal correspondence, like letter writing between different people from far-off regions that learned about it. And the Sheikh was a philosopher, a religious scholar, an author, a poet, all of these things. So he wrote a lot of his famous poems and his manuscripts in this script, like this one. And it perfectly fit the phonology of the Oromo language. During this time and before this time, the Oromo language was using the Ge'ez script, which was the official orthography / script of choice in Ethiopia and Eritrea. And that script is quite good for the Semitic languages spoken in the region. It could work for Oromo, but there are a lot of issues with gemination, where you double a letter, and there's a lot of issues with having twice as many vowels as a language like Amharic, which is the most famous language that uses the Ge'ez script, where Semitic languages in Ethiopia and Eritrea, where most of them have around 7 vowels, Oromo will have 10, and there was no clean way to use the Ge'ez script to be perfectly suitable for the Oromo language, without a lot of ancillary and excessive things that made it counterintuitive. But this Abu Ghida was perfectly well suited for the language. But the reason I say that the Ge'ez script was the preferred language, it was more like enforced. When I say that the Ge'ez script was the preferred script for the region, it's more like it was the only enforced script during that time, especially when because at that time also it was an empire with very clear values on which languages should be used, which orthography should be used. So when I think maybe 9 years after this script was created, the sheikh was actually under a decade-long honorable confinement, which just means house arrest basically. But it was during this time that his most prominent work, this manuscript called Shalda, was written, and it was a scathing indictment of oppression against the Oromo people, and it was written in this script. The shocking thing is this script is used today, which there wasn't a lot of literature on if it survived, but recently me and another person very interested in Ethiopian scripts, Daniel Jakob, we got in contact with a chemist in Ethiopia named Anesso Muhammad, and in his free time he teaches in this script, and you can see a classroom there. Actually, Anesso just published a book on Sheikh Bakri Sapalo. It is written in the Latin orthography for the Oromos language, but I recently helped submit a proposal to Unicode for the script with Daniel's enormous help, and we got a lot of endorsement from maybe a couple dozen Oromo scholars that wished for the script to be digitized. If we go down to Southeast Africa into Malawi, there will be this script called the Mwangwego, and it looks a little something like this. And this font was made by a very talented font designer that has done a lot of work for African scripts in the past few years. And it's also an Abugida, similar to the Giz script, and it was created by Nolan Mwangwego in Malawi in 1977. And he's written one full book, flyers, educational material, and he's been teaching the script for more than 2 decades at this point. And I just want to quickly show you how the script works. So these are just the pure vowels of the script, a, e, o, u. And how what you'll notice is from this base letter that represents a, you'll make this slight adjustment on the bottom to create these vowels. So the same way we had a little lesson for the Giz script, if we had this base letter for the b sound, so this is just b, and you can imagine to make be, bi, bo, bu, you would make the same adjustments on the bottom, and it's pretty consistent. Well, actually, the story of this script is interesting. I think Nolan Mwangwego, he was in Paris at the time, and he learned about other writing systems. He might have seen Chinese or Arabic or Russian that uses something other than the Latin script, and he thought to himself, I wonder if our language had one at one point, because we have words for writing that aren't loan words, and I've seen other people using other systems, so I wonder what I could do. And he put in a lot of work, maybe 30 years worth of work, refining his script from 1977 until he, quote unquote, publicly advertised it in at the turn of the 21st century. And it similar to the Sheikh Bakri Sapalo script, it is very fitting for Malawian languages like Chichewa, Tumbuka, and etc., which are spoken by maybe 15 to 20 million people. Since the turn of the century, about 2,500 to 3,000 people have partially or fluently learned it. And similar to Nko, there's no government funding, but informal education has been consistent at least for the past 15 years in each region of Malawi, also north, central, and south. I think this will be someone's favorite after I get through with it, because the script looks like this, and it's called the Mondobe script. It was created by this man, Mr. Pai, and he also got it from a dream, similar to a few other ones that we discussed earlier. But he had a dream that it was revealed to him by someone named Simon Kimbangu, who was the founder of a Christian new religious movement in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And again, it was created specifically for the 4 official languages of the DRC: Kikongo Yalete, Lingala, Chisuluba, and Swahili. The way the script works is there are these 2 symbols that look like it looks similar to like a digitized number 5 and a number 2, and they're considered holy symbols where everything is built around them. So it consists of consonant letters and vowel letters, which are combined into syllabic blocks, similar to the Korean alphabet Hangul. All of the letters are based on these 2 shapes. The 6 vowels are distinguished by numerals that you add to the right of the 5 shaped letter, and consonants fall into 4 different groups or shapes, which are distinguished by adding a short stroke to the 5 shaped letter for 3 of the groups, and into 4 families or orientations, which are distinguished by reflecting and rotating the letter shapes. The four families of consonants are attached to the same corner of the vowel, which is reflected and rotated to match the consonant, so that the consonant resides in a different corner of the syllabic block depending on its orientation. So if you look closely, and I read that, by the way, because it's also hard to think about and describe this script. But if you look here, these consonants, na, va, sta, and ta, they are considered in group 1, where they have this shape of a 5. These sounds, b, d, f, g, are considered in group 2. They have this shape. It was also built off of this shape, like that looks like a 5, but they added this line in the middle. And the way you orient it depends on the family. So na and ba, they're considered in family 1. They will always be at the bottom left corner of this syllabic block. And to go from family 1 to family 2, each family has a different corner they occupy. So you go from left, right, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. And I quite like this because when you write a lot of it, it looks quite cool. Oh yeah, and here are some of the rules. But when you write a lot of it, it looks like this, which looks quite digital. And it's interesting that it was from, I think, 1977, but it looks quite futuristic. And this has a dedicated Mandobe academy in the DRC, and a lot of people use it because it is tied to a religion. So there's a lot of followers of the religion. I think there's maybe 6 million followers of this specific religion, and a lot of them have learned it. I was talking with one linguist and designer in South Africa who told me that there was a school run also, I think in DRC or maybe neighboring Rwanda or Uganda, that also taught this script, but there was no religious obligation. You didn't really have to join the church to learn it, because a lot of people were just curious to learn it, to apply it to their native language, like Lingala or something. Then we get to Fula, and I should speed up because we're running out of time. The Fula language is quite widespread. I don't even know how many speakers there are, but the ethnicity, the people, they extend from the furthest part of Senegal in Western Africa and all the way up to Sudan and Ethiopia, mainly concentrated in the West, but they span almost the entire width of the continent. So I'm going to go through some of their scripts. One was created by Modibo Bello Amadou Muhammadu in northern Cameroon between 1941 and 1951. I think he started creating this when he was 10 years old until he was 20. Now he's quite old, but I think he's still alive in northern Cameroon. And his script is also alphabetic. The reason he created this was because one, he was a Muslim scholar, and he was quite a prodigious. He was a prodigy. He was a prodigy when he was a child. But he wanted to disprove elders in his community that the Fula language could be written in something other than the ancient Arabic script that they've been using for countless centuries. And he did prove them wrong. He he would spend some time in Sudan and learn from different people, different scholars about during his Islamic studies. But in the meantime, secretly, he would be improving this script. And at one point, he challenged a man that he challenged the man that said it wasn't possible to a guessing game, and he said, "I bet I can write every sound in our language, and you can test me by throwing the longest words you can think of and the most complicated words you can think of, and it'll be consistent every single time." And when he proved that to him, the man finally admitted, like, "Okay, yeah, you're right." And the script never made it past those that would listen to him when he went back to northern Cameroon. There's two other scripts that will only be talked about very briefly because there's not much known about them. One is called Dita and one is called Ba, and they look like this: Dita on top with Ba on the bottom. And they're both from Mali. From the end of late 50s, early 60s. And this is pretty much everything I know about this. I've asked scholars in Mali and Niger and surrounding countries, but I can't find anything about these other than the existence of these shapes. Next is Adlam, and this one will get its own slide next. It was created in 1989 by Ibrahima and Abdoulaye Bari as teenagers when in Guinea. And to me, this is the current gold standard. It has reached Ncol levels of acceptance, and I think a little more, to be honest. The reason Adlam is, which looks like this, the reason why it's so interesting for linguists and also historians of writing systems is because how far it went. So the story goes, one night in the 80s, these two teenagers, these brothers, who are still alive and quite young, which is to the benefit of this script, in my opinion. One night they just thought, how would these sounds look like in our language, instead of relying on the Arabic script that they've been using for centuries. And after spending a whole night just thinking about this, they started refining it over the next several years. One very important thing that I should mention, I think one of the biggest reasons why the script succeeded so much is because in the early stages, they created material that was very pertinent to everyday life for them and their neighbors and people in surrounding regions and countries, like how to take care of your child, infant care, how to filter out water to not get sick, how to have clean water for cooking, etc. Because when you have valuable, that's also the reason why people will learn, let's say, English or Spanish or French or Portuguese in Africa, because the access to certain education is valuable. So if you create valuable material in a specific script, there's more of a reason to learn it because you're gaining something. Today it's taught in many schools across their native Guinea, in several different cities, but also it spread very, very far because the Fulani people that speak Fula, they're so widespread and so many people have accepted it at this point. It's taught in a lot of neighboring countries. But since Pular is another word for the Fula language, because it's not an official language of education in any of these countries, the script is only used as an additional program offered to students, and it's not the official orthography in these schools. But because of this widespread success and adoption and acknowledgement of the script, I recently talked to Abdoulaye actually last night, and he told me that the government of Guinea, who has a population around 13 million, they have a goal to educate 2 million illiterate people by 2030, and they want to use the Adam script to combat this illiteracy, because the script really is so good for their language in terms of being phonetically sound. Another reason it's so successful is because the followers of this script are extremely passionate and creative. You can do a lot of stuff with the script at this point. It's been integrated into Microsoft Suite's displays recently. I think the font designers for this won some prestigious award. I don't know too much about font design, but even I couldn't escape the news of it. It's integrated into a lot of technology. It's supported by Unicode. People can text, and do anything with it at this point. I was seeing coverage of AFCON, the African Cup of Nations, that is happening right now. I recently saw coverage of it in Fula with the Adlam script, and there's dedicated news sites like this one. I would like to talk a little bit about defunct scripts real quick. For the Igbo language, specifically in southeast Nigeria, there's one that looks like this, and it was created in the 1950s, named after Nwagu Aneke. It's a syllabary with some logography elements, I think, and it was specifically created for his dialect in the 1950s. He claimed to not have any knowledge about reading or writing, and it was revealed to him by spirits, perhaps in a dream. Again, there's a dream counter at this point. It's a very common thing to happen, even up until the 50s. He wrote several books, like more than 100, and especially during the 50s, it was anti-colonial commentary. And then later he wrote a lot of diary entries, and especially lengthy ones. I wouldn't consider them diaries, more like short novels. There's another one called Aka Umwagbara. This was created in the 1980s by Ogona Agu. And this is based on traditional Uli symbols in Nigeria for the Igbo people. The Uli symbols are traditional symbols that look a little like this. And I can't find too much information about this specific writing system, but presumably they would look very influenced by this. It was part ideographic and part phonetic for the most part, from what I've read. Now, a very interesting script called Ndebe, which I think could be very successful in the future. This was created in 2009 by Lotana Igwe Odunze, and she refined it for the next more than a decade. Even this past year, I saw her integrating more and more changes based off of user feedback, which the users are quite passionate about and are interested in experimentation. I wouldn't know how to really classify this script. It's semi-featural. Featural means there's something about the script that looks like the sound it's making. And it's relative to your language, of course, and your phonetics. But the most famous one is the Korean script, which is like an entire history course on in itself. It's somewhat of a syllabary and somewhat of an abugida. I'll actually because I've taught you guys so much at this point between syllabary and abugida, I'll let you guys give me advice, actually. This is what it looks like. The consonant bodies have two components. On the left and on the top, surrounded by this red line. When you combine the two, then you will get the sound that is directly underneath. So when you combine this consonant body with this hanging top, you will get this nua sound. When you combine this, when you can combine the same consonant body with this hanging sound, you'll get ba, and so on and so forth. The interesting thing is, I think it's the stroke of genius. She accounted for all of the Igbo dialects, which there are a lot. The way she does this is she assigns, so because there are so many dialects, but the changes in how one dialect says a word compared to another can be very consistent. The sound changes, the consonant changes, and the vowel changes are quite consistent across dialects. So apparently, it's quite easy to know what the other person is saying because they will constantly change that sound for a number of words. So the way she did this is she incorporated the change in sound to the same consonant body, so that in writing, everyone is understood without sacrificing how they write their own dialect. Quite similar to Chinese, actually. And you can see this. So for this particular consonant body combination, a lot like the two main dialects will either say ga or va, and this one will either say na, la, or ya, and so on and so forth. Which is, I think, it's quite innovative for a non-logography like Chinese. And the way you mark vowels is like this. So if you look at the letter A, the the low tone will look like this. The mid tone will look like this. The high tone will look like this. Because a lot of West African languages are very tonal, and one of the reasons she created the script was because in daily writing, when people write Igbo, it has a lot of diacritics that, one, it's not too aesthetically pleasing, but the more important thing is people will not write them because, and I think there's some literature also, maybe with Romanian, and also from what I've heard from my Romanian friend, where some people will just not write them because out of convenience. But it's okay for a language like Romanian because it's people can kind of get it more easily compared to an extremely tonal language like Igbo. So she wanted to circumvent this by incorporating the actual tones into the way you write vowels, so that people cannot take the lazy way out. Because writing is, you want to be more and more lazy. You want to make it as easy as possible to convey what you're saying. So she wanted to maintain this, but also not lose meaning in how you're writing. Another interesting thing she did was she maintained the native base 20 counting system for Igbo. A lot of languages have a base 20 system in their language, but after the colonial period, a base 10 system was introduced by the British through English, but she wanted to maintain that, and she also made a lot of graphically consistent ways to know exactly which number you're talking about. So 0, 5, 10, and 15 will have these shapes, and additions to any of these will add a very specific mark. One is the exception, of course. But going from 5 to 6, you'll see like this shape, and then you make a loop here. And going from 10 to 11 or 15 to 16, when you're just adding one more, you will add this this loop on the bottom portion. When you want to go one more than that, you'll add a line downward like this, from 6 to 7, 11 to 12, 16 to 17. And then when you want to go one more than that, you make it a little loop on the bottom, 7 to 8, 12 to 13, etc. And then the last one is another loop that you create. And the way you write it is you just take this consonant body, and then you attach the vowel of choice to the top, and you will get the sound you're wanting. This symbol here actually is the language Igbo in this language. And yeah. The next likely orthography for Igbo comes from this. I mentioned this on the, I think, second or third slide. So Nsibidi is an ancient proto-writing that has been in use for a very long time, but it's not considered a full writing system. But a really incredible thing happened in 2010. It was revived and transformed into a full logographic writing system in 2010, which was an enormous amount of work. Over the course of a decade, Chiadi Kobe in Nigeria, he looked at a lot of the archaeological evidence of Nsibidi, and he tried to make it work as a full writing system in logographic form, like Chinese, where you embed meaning instead of just sounds. Nowadays, it's currently curated by this group, Mpoa Oku, which is, they have a very popular Igbo dictionary online, and they incorporate these ideograms, this logographic system, typically in their dictionary. And you can see how there's dialectical versions, and you can see how the different logograms are created from radicals, similar to how Chinese is created from radicals in more complex ones. Here's a partial inventory of their Neo Nsibidi on their website, which you can go check out. Actually, it's very, very extensive. And again, there's 2,500 ideograms that were created since 2010. It's an immense amount of linguistic and design work, and just reading in general, because there's a lot of archaeological stuff they had to go through. And yeah, it's a very good, in general, it's a very good dictionary for hearing different dialects of Igbo, but the the script portion of it is quite impressive. And one particular person in the group named Jordan, I talked to him quite often. He is the most expert person in the script in this time after the original creator from 2010. He's created a lot of graphics for the script. He creates a lot of handwriting material for it, like standard calligraphy, like here. He also creates a lot of art like this, traffic signs, like historical context. And this group has a lot of the technical skills I think are necessary to drive a project of this magnitude, which is often lacking in many cases, especially with a writing system like this where it's logography. I know a lot of people. Chinese really is the only exception nowadays of a logography that is extremely successful. But again, Chinese has the benefit of being, their script has the benefit of being extremely old, and the evolution was very gradual for the past few thousand years. To go from something that was like in CBD from 400 AD until now, and creating more than 2,500 ideograms with very explicit etymologies, graphic etymologies. They're all connected from something from 1600 years ago, and they retain some resemblance in meaning. It is quite impressive. A lot of the people in this group are software engineers, linguists, designers, people in marketing. They have a very well-oiled machine, and I really believe in them. This is the last script. I know I'm over time by a lot. I'm sorry, but I gotta get through this one because I like it. This one is called the Temetsa Dinoko. It looks a little something like this, or it could look something like this, depending on how you feel. This is a featural syllabary. There's that word featural again. It looks like how the sounds are made in the language, similar to Korean. Or in Debe that we just talked about. It's a syllabary, and a very late one. Later we'll see some statistics about what kinds of writing systems there are. Syllabaries were quite popular in the 19th century and the early 20th century, but alphabets kind of eclipsed them later on. But this is an outstanding case of a syllabary coming in the 2010s from South African linguists and software engineers, and it can be used for any Southern Bantu language, which there are an enormous number of. Part of the reason this was created was in response to a paper that someone published that found the slowness in reading a language like Zulu in South Africa, which is the most spoken indigenous language of South Africa. This researcher was tracking the eye movement of extremely literate children in Zulu in the Latin orthography, and she compared baseline reading speeds compared to other languages that use Latin script. And she found that due to the Latin script not being condensed enough to quickly convey meaning in a highly agglutinative language like Zulu, she found that these children read a lot slower than kids of similar skill level in other languages. Here's a little bit of how it works. So a featural system, it has to have some kind of some component related to how you physically move when you make these sounds. So the vowel system, it's based on triangles, and these triangles are actually based on traditional letema from Southern Africa. The pattern found on houses, architecture, ancient cave paintings, clothing, etc. So if you look at the vowels, and especially if you look at a chart of the International Phonetic Alphabet, it's consistent with how the vowels are created in your mouth or on your tongue, the positioning of your tongue in your mouth. And it will be consistently like this from E to O. And phonetic characterizations are grouped together. So I'm not going to talk too much about the linguistics because I don't know if everyone here is a linguist. I'm not. But if you have phonemes, if you have sounds that are considered plosives, they group them together so that you know where you're working inside of one of these triangles, where to draw a line to indicate this sound. Or if you have sounds that are fricatives, you know where you're going to be working in relation to this triangle. You start with one of these triangles and you build on top of it to create something else. So yeah, I'm in contact with one of the designers in South Africa, and he told starting this year, actually 2024, there are now 3 universities that are teaching this at the university level. University of South Africa in the linguistics department, also heritage department and jewelry department at 2 other universities. And the jewelry design one also has been going on for a couple of years. Down in the bottom right, color isn't necessary, but I like that it's incorporating the colors from the original source of this script because they take it from cloth and design patterns from antiquity, and because they were highly colored, it could add something to writing. Of course, it doesn't help colorblind people, but the way color evokes emotion could be another dimension in writing. Almost done. Ooh, so sorry. Some quick statistics, just for the math people out there. I was interested in how many of what kind of writing systems there were. These include everything from antiquity until now. So these include like the original scripts, like hieroglyphics, Giz, Tifinagh. It really goes from an abjad all the way to an alphabet. This logography it's only beating the abjad because of the ancient ones in Egypt. In modern times, there's only the Neo in CBD that we saw recently for the Igbo language. But alphabets have dwarfed syllabaries, which were dominant in the 19th century and the early 20th century, when all of these scripts were being invented. But in the second half of the 20th century and now, most of them, with a few exceptions, are alphabets. And this could be due to the fact of the medium of instruction, like English or French, being alphabets, and it being what people most are familiar with. My country was also interesting. The number of scripts. We didn't go through all of these scripts, of course, because I'm already over time and I didn't go through everything. But some hotspots are places like Mali and Liberia. Nigeria is interesting because the languages spoken, the 3 biggest languages in Nigeria, Yoruba, Igbo, that we just talked about for Ndebe and Neo in CBD, they're so massive that I think because of their population, they have so many people that are interested in creating something like this. There's another language called Hausa, which is like the second biggest Afro-Asiatic language after Arabic, and they've had 4 scripts created for them. I didn't go through all of them for time's sake, but because of that, Nigeria is the clear winner. But it's a big hotspot, and historically, especially Liberia is a hotspot, as well as Mali. And by language, I put all the languages that have more than one indigenous script created for them if they have more than one. So you go from More, which is in Burkina Faso, which is underneath Mali, and there were 2 scripts created for them. And actually, I put these 2 people in contact with each other. They didn't know that they each separately created a script, one of which is being taught in a city called Po in Burkina Faso. And I bolded the scripts that are most used after colonial Latin orthography. I didn't do one for Igbo and Hausa because it's a little still too early to decide between Ndebe and Neo and CBD. but we'll see in the future. For Hausa, all of these scripts, the middle two, I know almost nothing about other than how they look. The top one, there was a school opened recently in northern Nigeria, where the inventor, he's still alive and he's opened a school, and I'll keep monitoring how much the script spreads from there. And then this last one we'll see a bit later, how Jami. And yeah, the four biggest ones are Igbo, Hausa, Manding, and Fula. Fula especially had a lot of scripts created in a very short amount of time. Last couple slides. When I say next steps, I mean what must be done for scripts to either gain acknowledgement or be used more. And the first thing is a font in this digital age. So I hope there's some very generous font designers in listening to this, because I don't know how to make a font. I tried very hard for one of them, and it took a very, very long time. But a font is generally needed. It's like a hack to get around the fact that you can't type these scripts on computers. If you make a font, you can use something like Microsoft Word if they have a computer, or if they have that software. And from there, you can show that a script is growing by people constantly typing and creating new documents. And that goes into data creation. Once you have the font, you can start making digital data. The next thing, which is the biggest thing, is Unicode. They are the threshold. That will, I don't know if they'll make or break a script, but without them, it's quite easy, in my opinion, to give up a script, because from the communities I've talked with, it's very easy to understand why people give up on scripts, because they're thinking, okay, what am I gaining from this? A lot of them succeeded in the 90s and the 2000s because they had such vital information that they were translating or transliterating into their script. But nowadays, because everybody is texting or sending voice messages, you need to be as lucrative as that to communicate. And without Unicode, you can't really do that. Of course, there's manuscript culture, but again, a lot of people send voice notes or text. And literacy campaigns. This isn't something that happens after Unicode. It's just in general, all the time. It needs to be done. And the biggest thing that is almost impossible is acknowledgement or support from official bodies. And what the bodies I'm talking about are usually governments or ministries of education, something like that. I do feel like the winds are changing, especially in some places like Mali in West Africa. And there's still a lot of work to do to convince perhaps the people in charge to give these scripts a chance to improve literacy and some other reasons like ethnic identifiers or cultural confidence. So really almost the last slide. This map is about to get very messy, and it will be hard to track what will happen, but this was made on purpose. We're going to go through time and see how scripts popped up from antiquity until now. I'm not going to really comment too much, but we'll see how you feel about this. At this point, antiquity is over, from what I've defined as antiquity in the beginning slides. Or now it is with Coptic. And then we get some proto-writing in CBD in Southeast Nigeria. Then the 1830s start happening, and you get this undeciphered Oromo script. You get Vai all the way on the other side of the continent. You get Bamum in Cameroon. You get Bagam, which we went over. Then three scripts almost simultaneously appear in the Osmania one in Somalia, and then these two in Sierra Leone and in Liberia. Okay, it's getting a little more clustered. This is where the Gola comes in right after Basava, probably inspired by it. You get the first one for Yoruba, which we didn't go over. You get this Manding script, Masaba, in Mali, which most people didn't know was still being used till today. Then starts more of the Somali scripts. Then comes more scripts over here, the Loma script, the Capella script. This is where Liberia is almost peaking in terms of script invention. You get a script for a constructed language associated with a church in Nigeria. You get the Cameroonian Fula script from the man that wanted to prove you could write Fula in something other than Arabic. And then you get the next gold standard in Nko, coming from Ivory Coast. The last Somali script is created. The Beria, the script that was created from brand marks like on the camel's neck, was created in the 50s. And it just keeps going on and on and on. More are created, especially in West Africa. The Garai script in Senegal is for the Wolof language, and thankfully it should be released in Unicode, I think, this year. More Fula scripts are created. The first Hausa script is created, and I'm just gonna keep going because it gets extremely crowded the longer you go on. And a lot of these we didn't go through, but it's never ending. It's really never ending. And this last one is the most recent one I know of. It's also a Hausa script in northern Nigeria. And I said I would briefly mention it earlier. I'm not going to go through it, but with this script, I think it really was created last month. I saw this newspaper in a Latin orthography Hausa newspaper, and it's this guy, and he just wanted to create one, and he already has a few followers that I'm aware of. I don't know how far it'll go, but he has a designer that he works with to create at least this, and teaching people online, places like Facebook. It's quite common nowadays for especially people in this age range to teach either on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok. I was just scrolling one day on TikTok and I found a script in Mali for the Soninke language, and I've never heard of it. But I think there's more avenues now to have outreach, but at the same time, because of all this technology, it's harder to maintain momentum when it's easy to give it up because you can't really do anything with it without Unicode. And that's everything. If you want to read about every single script that appeared on that map, go to this link. It came out last November or something like that, autumn time last year. And then I had a lot of help with this from people like Daniel Jacob, Neil Patel from a typography duo, Janma Patel, Charles Riley, the catalog librarian at Yale, and Tim Brooks, the head honcho of a lot of endangered writing stuff. And if you know anything or you want to tell me about anything related to this, then yeah, there's my email. And that's it. Thank you.
I think Olish put that link in the chat.